Good afternoon. Welcome to the first session of South by Southwest Connect to Cancer, the second annual program here at South by Southwest, which I think is a really great example of new fields coming together in a technology spectrum to impact the future of health and cancer. I'm a pediatric oncologist by training and really passionate about improving cancer across the spectrum. There's a lot of new technologies that are moving very, very rapidly, from digital health to genomics to 3D printing to AI. And we have the opportunity to use those, I think, to reimagine the future of cancer, from preventing cancer in the first place, to doing a better job of early diagnostics, to personalizing therapy, to globalizing access, whether it's in rural America to rural Africa, and finally discovery. How do we accelerate cures and bring many people and connect across the spectrum? And of course, healthcare tends to be pretty siloed right now. I'm an oncologist. They don't often talk to the other ologies. The data is often very siloed between electronic medical records, genomes, clinical trials, pharma, big data. And we have the opportunity, I think, the theme today, to connect those dots and bring them forward with all the different energy, people, and energy that's coming into cancer across the spectrum. And so it's better that convergence, that connecting, that I think is the theme in To Connect to Cancer, this first session, and connecting the dots between the two sessions we'll have later today. And I think exemplified by that is the amazing energy initiatives that were started by the Biden Cancer Moonshot, which I was lucky to participate in DC a year or so ago, and now moving forward to the Biden Cancer Initiative, which we'll hear about shortly. I was lucky to be at that initial Cancer Moonshot Summit. And what's powerful about bringing different players together across the spectrum, that helped catalyze a project I'm involved in now, a Cancer Exerprise, where we're going to be prizing new ways to democratize accurate, affordable, and rapid cancer diagnostics. Imagine cancer screening as easy and as cheap as a urine dipstick for pregnancy. So today we're going to be connecting a lot of the dots. We have a lot of amazing folks who will be on stage and here in the room. And I think the potential is for all of us to leverage the new data, the new energy, to think differently about the future of cancer. And as summarized by this slide, it's the future of cancer is no one field. It's putting together the energy of activists and patients and clinicians and technologists, the Internet of Things, crowdsourcing data, and beyond to reimagine cancer going forward. So I'm really honored to be bringing up the beginning of this amazing day, Dr. Jill Biden and Taboo. And what I think they exemplify is kind of the human element, having both been touched in very personal ways by cancer and now bringing their energy and initiatives to bring new players into the space and accelerate cures. And I think that is the mission of the Biden Initiative and many of us in the room. And Jill as a leading advocate, and Taboo as a musician and now patient, bringing cancer to Indian reservations and beyond. I think we can really democratize and accelerate cancer. So let's all be thinking about how we connect the dots today. And I'm really honored to bring up first Dr. Jill Biden and Taboo to kick off the day.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So were you as nervous as I was when Daniel hopped up here? I'm just glad he made it. So it's great to be back here at South by Southwest. And there's so many interesting and entertaining things that you could be doing today at this moment. And you could be doing films or classes or meetups, and even a panel on the search for alien life. So why are you here? So you're here, I'm guessing, because the same reason that I am. Because you're connected to this. We're all connected to this. We've all been touched by cancer in some ways, and we're looking for answers. So just this morning, I met at a small cafe with a bunch of people who were doctors or survivors or navigators, caregivers. And they were talking to me about what they needed in this cancer space. And that's one of the things I'm going around this country doing, is talking to people, having conversations. Where are the holes? Where do we need to fill in? Where do we need to do better? And and the interesting thing was the caregivers were the men in the group. And the women were the ones who were the experts and were working. So that was kind of interesting to me. And the one thing that they all kind of said to me was, we need to have resources that we can access that are all in one place, so we're not going here and here and here and here. So we're taking that back. And so I'm sure the Biden Cancer Initiative is going to have really great news in a short amount of time. But we'll have to wait till we work on that a little bit. So the first time that I heard a cancer diagnosis was about a friend, and I was in my early 40s. And that year, I had 4 of my friends who were diagnosed with breast cancer. 3 of them survived, but 1 of them didn't, my friend Winnie. And she had 3 teenage children. And, you know, I was devastated. And I knew that, you know, I had to do something. You know, cancer took the lives of my parents, my sister, who was treated by a stem cell transplant. I sat with her in the hospital for months. And then there was our son, Bo, my brave, funny, strong, bright son, who died of brain cancer. And we tried everything we could. And for over a year, he fought with every ounce of his strength. Only a handful of people knew what we were going through. But Joe and I had to keep up our official duties and just sort of put one foot in front of the other and keep going. You know, we often don't know what's behind someone's smile or how much they need our strength or our grace. That was the darkest time of our lives. Cancer took more than we ever imagined from us. It shattered our hearts. It stole our joy. But you know what? We're not alone. We are not alone. I'm sure it has touched, I bet all of you, raise your hand if you've been touched by someone who's had cancer in your family. Oh my gosh, everyone in this room. Far too many of you know that feeling of terror, how lonely you can feel when you're struggling through it, how heavy that grief feels when you suffer through that irreplaceable loss. We're here today because we want answers. We want hope. We want to end this disease. You know, there's some great panels coming up this afternoon with some really brilliant people. And they're going to tell you about new breakthroughs and new technologies. They're going to talk about bridging gaps between researchers and advocates and the leaders in the private sector. They're going to talk about precision medicine and ways to advance the universe of our knowledge. At the Biden Cancer Center Initiative, that's exactly what we're focused on, bringing doctors, researchers, and advocates together around prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and a cure. We're focused on finding the gaps in our cancer strategy and filling them in, on supporting the incredible efforts that are already happening in our medical community. But, you know, I'm not a researcher, I'm not a doctor, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. And what I want you to know is this: we need you. It doesn't matter where you come from or what you do or who you are. We need you. Because if we're going to find the answers, if we're going to seize the hope, we're going to have to do this together. Maybe that means creating new technologies that help connect people to their doctors or others who are going through the same thing. Maybe that means participating in trials. Maybe that means reminding your loved ones to take care of themselves, to check themselves regularly and see a doctor. And maybe that means finding ways to lift up each other during our darkest hours. Because beneath the research and the studies and the medicine, it's always about people. It's always about families, about children, like my grandchildren, who know about hospitals more than anyone should, about moms and dads who deserve to see their kids grow up, about everyone in this room who put their hands up today. In the White House and through the Biden Cancer Initiative, we've heard so many unforgettable stories. We've met patients and survivors who, in the face of this frightening disease, choose courage. They choose hope. They choose to be fierce rather than afraid. And there's one man here who is the epitome of that spirit, my friend Taboo. Now, maybe some of you are wondering why a member of the international sensation, the Black Eyed Peas, was joining me here on stage. No, we aren't planning a duet of Where is the Love? Well, not today anyway. Taboo has been an incredible supporter of our efforts because he is a survivor himself, and he serves on our Biden Cancer Initiative board. So I can't wait for you to hear his story, and it's my great honor to share a stage with an advocate, an ally, and a friend. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guy, Taboo.
Thank you. Wow. Man, how do I follow that? You know, that Dr. Biden looks amazing. She looks like she's the next Black Eyed Pea member. Look at Man, you know, I was thinking, how can I approach this? Should I write out a speech? Should I write what I'm feeling? Then I said, what if I speak from the heart so you could see exactly the emotion and the roller coaster that I experienced? Can I walk around? Is that cool? I'm a rapper. Remember that? The emotion and the experience that I went through 3 years ago. Let's start with April 2014. I was doing a solo run, and I was performing here at South by Southwest. And I remember being on stage battling to win over the audience. And I was performing, and I was focused, I was locked in, I was physically fit, I was mentally there, focused, and ready to take over the world, as I thought. 3 months later, I started getting these excruciating back pains. So now we go from April to June 23rd, the night of June 23rd. Back pains start becoming abdomen pains, and then I tell my wife, there's something seriously wrong with me. So she says, why don't you go to the ER? I go to the ER, and I don't know how I made it, but I drove there myself. I walked in hunched over like this. I said, sir, there's something really wrong with me. He's like, okay, you got to wait with everybody else. And I pulled the Black Eyed Pea card, ladies and gentlemen. I had to. So I said, no, you don't understand, man. I got this excruciating pain. I need help. So after I pulled the card, he was like, well, come on in, gentlemen. So I walked in, and it's sad to say, but I had to do it because I felt like I was going to die. And I walked in, they gave me my tests, they gave me CT scan, MRI, and they didn't know exactly what I had. So in April, I was battling to win over a crowd, and then the test results came back, and they said, excuse me, Mr. Gomez, we're sorry to inform you, but you have a tumor that's 4 centimeters wide, 4 centimeters long, and it's cancer. They didn't tell me what type of cancer I had. So as soon as they tell you cancer, I went into, how can this happen to me? What happened? I took a flight from, I forgot, where were we at? So my boy David Lara, who's part of my management team, he says to me, hey, there's only one flight back home, and it's coach. I was like, let's go home. So I thought, I got cancer from sitting in coach? Which is dumb, because I was being a jerk at the time, trying to figure out why I got cancer. Sometimes you come up with the most, ridiculous ideas of why you could get cancer. Is it because I went to Japan? Is it because you just start going into this like, why? So then the doctor says, you have testicular cancer, stage 2, and you have to go into surgery tomorrow. And I said, can I get a second opinion? He says, yeah, you can get a second opinion when you're running against the time. So I thought maybe holistic, maybe let me go down a natural healing. He says, you could do that, sir, but you're running against time. So the next day I was in surgery, got my right testicle removed, and then they say, you have to go into chemotherapy. How many people have done chemotherapy here? 5 of us. Would you say that that was the worst experience of your life?
For me, no, thank God.
For me, it was like war, torture, and a nightmare all in one. Because it was 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. And here I am, hey, I'm on top of my fitness. I'm the healthiest guy on the planet. That's what I thought. But cancer has no prejudice. So when I got diagnosed with cancer, I went into chemotherapy, and I did it for 12 weeks, and there was moments where I wanted to give up. I said to myself, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm done. And my wife said, we got to champion this. We got to make it through. Look, we have little ones. You got to fight through this. You're a warrior. You have the warrior spirit. Do not give up. So I didn't give up. And by the grace of God, I'm here. I made it through my chemo round. And they kept telling me, look, it's testicular cancer stage 2, but it's spreading so fast that it's going to go from your 2 lymph nodes to your lungs, and it will spread to your brain, and you will die. And when you're faced with mortality, career doesn't matter, profession does not matter, status does not matter, because now it's Jimmy Gomez, father, husband, fighting for his life. And I felt like if you give me a chance to beat this, I promise I will do everything I can to be part of this ultimate fight. I want to champion this. I want to be the guy, the beacon of light. Specifically because as a Native American, as a Mexican kid growing up, I go to these different reservations and I see that there's no oncology centers. There's no medical facilities. If you're on a res, you have to drive an hour or 2 hours away to get any type of treatment, proper medication, proper facility, proper technology. So I said to myself, those are my people. I got to do something for them. I want to do something for the world and be, helpful to everyone, but let's also do something in our own backyard. So I made it a conscious effort to become part of the American Cancer Society, which is my family, but also the Biden Cancer Initiative. Because I felt like I got 2 hands, I'm going to fight this with both hands. American Cancer Society, Biden Cancer Initiative. And we're going to beat this together. It may take a long time, but I'm in here for the long haul. I'm here to kick some ass. And the thing that I learned about it was resilience. I learned to never put anything before my health. Listen to your body, as they always say. Listen to your body. A lot of times as men, we don't want to check our testicles. Why? But in reality, we need more advocates for that. More people to say, look, it's okay. It's okay to go get checked. It's okay to, if there's something wrong with you, don't avoid it. Don't wait until the last moment, because you never know. I thought it was just a back pain from flying coach. Ridiculous, right? But yeah, and the most amazing thing that happened after that journey was I did chemotherapy, and the doctor said, sorry, Mr. Gomez, I don't think you could be able to have any more children. So he said, but you could look into HRC. So we went there, me and my wife, we met with the doctors, and we talked about it, and we said, you know what, we have 2 amazing children. If it happens, cool. If not, it's okay. She said, as long as you're healthy, as long as you're alive, that's all that matters. We have you here. And a month later, we found out we were going to have a baby. So I have a baby daughter. My one and only girl whose story is not just father and daughter, it's overcoming adversity together. She was my chemo baby. And now she kicks my ass every day. She runs around and she's the one that's like, you have to watch what she's doing because she's very active and she's a blessing. She's my miracle baby, and I'm very proud that I had a second chance at life, but that I'm doing it right because I'm taking the steps to learn, to educate myself, to be an advocate, to be an activist for positivity, for hope, for inspiration, where it's needed. Because in our industry, a lot of times we're so self-grandizing and so about ego that we forget about we, because we're so caught up in me. And I choose to now say, how can we be of service? How can we help everyone? Because it's this platform that I have to speak to over 60 million people because of the frequency of music to now inform the youth about prevention, about diet, about nutrition, about ways to go about preventing what happened to me and what happened to a lot of us. I could go into inner cities, go to different neighborhoods, go into on the res and speak to these kids because of my background in pop culture. And it's a direct connection because I speak their language and they know me from music, but now they know me as part of the Biden Cancer Initiative. Now they know me as part of the American Cancer Society. They know me as a person that will just be of service and help. So that's my new mission. It's like I always say, what is my 42 to whatever? I don't want to just be living a catalog of music. I'm going to leave a legacy for my kids to say, my dad actually did something to be of service and to help human beings. And that's it. I spoke from the heart. I told you my truth, my honest reflection and experience, my testimony of that time period. But the most amazing thing is that now I get to be part of the fight with these amazing people on stage. Can we get a round of applause for these amazing people? And I'm going to leave you with this. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I know you could be out there enjoying those meals and enjoying the drinks and all the amazing things that are happening out there. But here you will be informed, you will be educated, and you will be allowed to dream about how we could be of service with new technology, new methods, new research facilities. And for me, it's like I'm just a student. I'm absorbing all this information, and I'm becoming well-versed in the cancer world and using that to be able to help in the fight against cancer. Thank you.
Don't you just love him? Thank you, Taboo.
Thank you.
There's no word as frightening as cancer, but stories like Taboo's remind us to find our courage, and they inspire hope. At the Biden Cancer Initiative, we want to lift up those stories, your stories, and we want to change the face of what cancer looks like. And that's why we've launched a new campaign called Cancer Fears. Cancer Fears honors the patients, families, caregivers, and the medical community who go beyond fear. It reflects the strength, the persistence, and the drive of the community. It's for the people who fight every single day to move us one step closer to a world where no one needs to be afraid of this disease. It's really for all of you. So I have one more ask of you, and that is to share your #CancerFierce story. Our team is here today, and we're ready to capture it. There's a big cancer fierce community out there. And our mission is to bring it together, to let people know, hey, you're not alone, that they too are fighters. They too are fierce. Before I go, I want to share a passage from a book that has always inspired me. Now, you know I'm an English teacher, so you had to get a little English today. Poet Audre Lorde wrote about her battle with breast cancer. She described the terror that she felt as it threatened her life. But over time, she realized, and I quote, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less important whether or not I am unafraid." We dare to use our strength in the face of cancer and chemotherapy, in the bright operating rooms and the dark recovery rooms, in the clinics and in the research labs. We dare to use our voices to speak for the people we've lost. We dare to use our lives to fight for those who will come. And when we do those things together, it doesn't matter whether or not we are unafraid, because we are powerful, we are fierce, and we are not alone.
Thank you first to Dr. Biden for sharing so inspirationally this sense of the journey, the resilience, and the hope in terms of not being alone during these times that are so trying. And I too experienced it, like many of you in the room, and was touched with my father, unfortunately had AML. And somewhere he is shining and smiling down at me. And my mother, thank goodness, is a survivor of breast cancer and going strong. But all of us have faced this. And what we hope to do today is, over the next 20 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A, is experience the journey of a cancer patient, the way Tabu started to share it with us too.
Oh, very descriptive. Sorry to interrupt, just to interject. The way I tell stories is to describe it and act it out, because I feel like then you get a sense of like what emotion I felt at the time, and how, you know, sometimes you have to have humor and actually use light in such a time of darkness, and in a place where, you know, I could have gave up, but I kept going, you know, and I'm grateful that you guys are giving me a chance to speak on that, so thank you again.
Well, thank you, and for doing it so incredibly generously and so openly. And one thing I am going to ask you to do, Tabu, and you agreed to do this,
Yep.
which was so nice of you. So Dr. Biden said there wasn't going to be a duo, but there is going to be a solo. And Tabu, before we actually start, and I'll introduce the panelist here, actually said that he would do a quick line, starting with, and you remember it, right?
Yes.
All right, so here we go.
It's I got a feeling that today's gonna be a good day, right?
Panel. A good panel.
Sorry, guys.
Dude.
Sorry.
All right.
Not my best work, but
Thank you for sharing
that's
that.
chemo brain.
No, in all honesty, let me go ahead and introduce our very, very distinguished panel that's joining us here. First and foremost, we've got Greg Simon, and I'm going to ask him to actually do his own introduction. But I've known Greg for a long, long time, and I was a little fearful that I could even manage him on topic during this panel. And he's been threatening to go off message all the way along. So with that, Greg, why don't you do a quick introduction?
I'm Greg Simon. I'm the president of the Biden Cancer Initiative. Half of our team, Lisa, Danielle, Cecilia, are here on the front row if you'd like to meet them later. And I was the executive director of the White House Cancer Moonshot Task Force, which was a surprise to me. But when they called and asked me to do that, they didn't even know that I had just finished chemotherapy. So it was one of those universal congruence things where I was just finishing chemotherapy and I get a call, can you come do a cancer thing? So what are you going to say? So I was delighted to do it, honored to do it.
Thank you. And to my right here, we have Dr. Peter Pisters, who is recently appointed, although this is a coming home for him, at the MD Anderson Cancer Center, which many of you know is world-renowned and one of the leaders in the world associated to it. So, Greg, just give it a little bit, Greg, sorry, I'm still on you, dude. Give us a little bit of a sense of, a little bit more about you.
Certainly. I'm Peter Pisters. I'm a cancer surgeon, a cancer researcher, and now privileged to be the president of the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, where I lead right now 20,000 cancer fighters who are united around three simple words. We are making cancer history.
Thank you. All right, so what we're going to try to do now is just go through a cancer patient's journey, from diagnosis all the way through to treatment and then post-treatment. And we'll try to do this in fairly rapid order. And Tabu, I'm going to start with you. When you were first told about the diagnosis, you shared this a little bit, but what did you struggle the most with through your cancer journey?
I would have to.
You talked about chemo being, your terms, right? That was torture.
It was torture because I had nothing prepares you for the fight. But for me, as a, you gotta understand, I was coming on the heels of like the best shape of my life. Like, I was a skinny dude. I'm still a skinny dude, but I was always ashamed of my body. For the first time, I'm even getting choked up thinking about it. For the first time in my life, I felt confident about my physique, about my nutrition, my diet, everything. In 2014, I was on top of my game. And then you get hit with cancer, and it's like, oh, wow, okay, now it makes sense. All this work that I've been doing in the gym, what prepared me physically to go into this battle against cancer, because I lost everything that was good about me. My insides, my hair, my eyebrows, the pale skin. I just became what I always saw on television. And it's sad to say, but I felt like I'm not gonna make it. I'm giving up. That's what I felt. At one point, I'm giving up. I cannot do this chemo thing. But luckily, my wife and my kids and my best friend in the back, David, who were always there, they taught me about resilience and holding on to that warrior spirit, because there was a fight. There was a fight against time, and I felt like I learned about myself, and I learned about healing and how to really appreciate every moment that I'm on this earth. Because, like I said earlier, you're so caught up in your career and your profession and your job and your daily that you forget to listen to your body. And that's the most important thing that I will stress to everyone, is to listen to your body. Don't ever put anything before your health, because we only get one life to live.
Absolutely. And Greg, you went through it, and you're a survivor, yes. And you didn't have the torture, you said, and chemo. But yet, go back to that moment when you were actually diagnosed. What did you think? And how did you react? And what was your first sort of instinct in terms of what you were going to go do?
Well, of course, having been in the health business in different ways for a long time, I had a very sophisticated response, which was, what the fuck?
Kids in the audience.
Because nobody goes to get checked for leukemia, right? You usually find out you have leukemia because you get really sick, or you have acute leukemia and you hit the ground. So I was just getting a physical because my doctor wouldn't refill my Ambien prescription because he hadn't seen me in 2 years. And if you think about what happens when you go give blood, when you get a physical and you get checked, it's a metaphor for our health system. There's a tube for cholesterol testing, and there's a tube for this and a tube for that. And if you don't ask for the tube to check for leukemia, they're not going to check it. So I had gotten a physical, and I called my doctor. He didn't call me. And I'm like, I'm calling you to get the results 4 days later, but you knew 3 days ago I had leukemia. What were you doing with it all that time? It's a metaphor for what happens to people every day. So
What did he say? Can I just ask?
he said, your cholesterol, I called him from an airplane, I just landed. It was Thursday, and if I didn't reach him, it would be the weekend because he wouldn't work on Friday. And I called him and said, how about my results? He said, oh, glad you called. Your cholesterol is good, your PSA is good, but by the way, you have leukemia. So I'm getting my bag down, and I'm hearing this, and I'm going, and he said, you should get that checked. I said, shit. So I got it checked. I know lots of doctors, right? I was actually going to see doctors for this. And so I kind of ran my doctor through it later, like, this test takes 20 minutes. It was done 4 days ago. I probably shouldn't have been flying without knowing this. You could have a blood clot in certain conditions. Anyway, to make a long story short, the people without insurance would never have done that test at all, right? That's the thing. We like to say that everybody's united to fight cancer, and everybody's united to fund NIH cancer fight. But if you are not united to ensure every single American, regardless of class, color, and wealth, then you are not committed to fighting cancer. I'll stop there.
All right. So we're doing a quick mic check here, and but I am going to turn to you, Peter, and having heard the patient experience of first hearing a diagnosis, how do you think about this at MD Anderson? What are you thinking about in terms of helping the patient and families through this journey?
Well, thank you, Sue. I think as we think about a lot of the challenges we've been talking about today, there are several things that we should really think about. One is access, which has been a common theme that has come up already. The second is navigation, because patients who have suspicion of cancer or newly diagnosed cancer have no navigation strategy. A third is a source for trusted information on cancer, and there is no source today for that. And as we think about those things, we have to really, if we go back to the access issue for a moment, recognize the challenge that we face. And I'll use the Texas example, where Texas has the highest proportion of uninsured individuals in the nation. And in Houston, as a metropolitan area, we have the highest proportion of uninsured across Texas. In Houston, that gives us 1 million people with no insurance, who by definition have no access to the front door of American medicine, and who, when pressed with the challenges that we're talking about today, struggle to get the kind of care that Taboo got, and the kind of access to high-quality services. That's a societal question that really hinges on the fundamental issue of, is healthcare a basic human right, or is it a luxury good? And that has to be thought through at higher levels and debated in forums like this. Navigation is a real challenge that we face in the system, and the fundamental issues that I think underpin that are the fee-for-service model for healthcare delivery. That creates a situation where there are economic incentives in the minds of most providers as they're thinking through therapeutic decision-making, and leads to a process by which patients are pulled through a variety of sources. That situation is complicated by the absence of a trusted go-to source for information on cancer, something that our organization is really going to be working on in the coming months, and will be a big part of our strategic plan going forward. Because what we really need to solve, we need to create an environment where there is a trusted go-to source for information, where we solve the navigation challenge, and where we work inside Washington and in forums like this to address the access issue.
Excellent, thank you. So, Tyler, go ahead.
I actually wanted to touch on that because you said something very profound. I was in Capitol Hill a couple months ago, and I was just meeting senators and trying to like see where I can, be of service and help in any way that I can, especially in the inner cities and in the underserved communities. And I said, I would like to go see the American Indian Center to see exactly where we're at as far as like funding and ways that we can help. I can't stress this enough, the underserved American Indian reservations, because that's my world. That's exactly what I want to be known for that, how I affect change, how I bring change, how I bring the Davos people, the people with money and capital, and be the bridge to the people that are the underserved. And when I went to the center, I was speaking to one of the assistants, and she was telling me about, where we're at as far as the food chain. And she says, American Indian Affairs, anything that deals with American Indians is the bottom of the totem pole. I found that very disturbing, because a person really doesn't know what the situation is on the res or in these underserved communities unless someone is really championing it and speaking on those issues and providing solutions and not just problems. Because what happens is a lot of times we have problems that we speak on, but there's no solution. So I want to be an advocate and actually champion ways that we can bring the people from Davos, as I said earlier, to be able to offset those costs, find advanced technology and doctors and research scientists to bring that same attention that we speak on to everybody else that has insurance, but specifically, I really hope that we can do that for the American Indian community and for the underserved communities as well.
Amen. So, so we heard access, we heard navigation, we heard it from Dr. Biden also, and we heard the notion of really wanting to make sure that regardless of race, how did you put it, Greg? Race, gender, wealth, whatever it might be, is that we absolutely have to make this available. So this is something that, of course, we're grappling here in the U.S. like crazy, and I think other countries are probably doing it better than we are. Let's go to treatment for a second, and we're going to move from diagnosis. And this is the notion of, everyone tends to think, particularly the provider systems, that treatment is about the medical treatment of cancer. And you started to allude that that's not necessarily just the case. And I'm going to turn to Greg and Peter in particular on this, and then I'm going to come back to you, Taboo, in terms of your opinions on it. It's give us a sense of how do we make it better so that it's not just about the medical treatment of cancer? What are some of the things that we can actually affect there?
Well, if you go into a research lab or a provider's office and you ask them what's your most valuable asset, you may hear our mass spectroscopy machine, our sequencing machine, our new fancy equipment. That's not it. It's you. It's people is the most important asset. Well, we're ignoring the most important asset. We don't share patients' data with other institutions so they can find out what's working, not working. We don't empower patients to share their data the way they want to so they can deal with problems in the Native American population or problems in their particular population, whether you're an Ashkenazi Jew or you're some other particular population genetically interesting group. We don't do that. We don't explain to patients what's going to happen to them. We just say you're going to have chemo. My first day at chemo, I'm sitting in the chair. They put in my IV. The nurse starts putting on protective gear, a mask, a visor, an apron. I'm sitting there. It's June. I'm in a T-shirt. And I'm like, whoa, what about me? And they're thinking, well, it's going to go in your arm. What do you care? If it spills on me, I do this 20 times a day. Well, if they had actually told me that, I wouldn't have been so freaked out, right? But no one's telling you that. So the patient is the key thing for the treatment. And the other thing is, it's hard to tell a patient, you can do this or you can do that, you choose. Oh, right, I'm a history major. I was a professional drummer. I'm not an oncologist. Do I want to do chemo or do I want to do immunotherapy? One's short-term, one's forever. How am I supposed to figure that out? So you have to trust somebody that you see in 15-minute increments every now and then, which is why it's much better to develop a relationship with the nurses. Because they see what happens to people, right?
Bless their hearts.
Right? They see who handles chemo well, who doesn't, who handles this well, who doesn't. And they're the ones who really know what's going on. I had a wonderful doctor, but I saw him maybe twice in 6 months of chemo in the chemo. I saw different nurses, they were all fantastic. And they could tell you, this is what's going to, how you're going to feel, if you do this, if you need that. So if we're not including patients in the wisdom generation activity of medicine, then we are really lost. And it's starting to happen, but it is still the exception. And some of us, you have been talking about this for 20 years, 30 years. It's time for us to get it and do it. And that means major institutions need to do what they're doing at MD Anderson and putting patients at the center instead of everything else. How many institutions, as one friend of mine, every researcher in his lab goes on rounds with him to his patients once a week. If you don't see that end of the spectrum, you're missing out while you're doing the other end.
Thank you.
I think one of the most important things that we're doing is really re-engineering the organization and turning it from an organization that was organized around providers and their needs and really reconfiguring it as an organization that is really organized around the patient and their holistic needs, their medical needs, their financial needs, the needs of their caregivers, their spiritual needs, and that will really help us to deliver the kind of patient experience that we're working on now, enhanced by innovation strategies and by a great team that's here today that's going to really help us to rebuild the patient experience anchored around the needs of the patient, who really are the people that we exist to serve. One important thing I want to emphasize that should be said today in a forum like this is the importance of prevention and the importance of social and behavioral determinants in the incidence of cancer. Right now, the reality of our society is that if we needed a single data point to figure out how you are going to do with whatever cancer you may be diagnosed with, the most valuable data point we could have is your zip code. And that is an unfortunate reality of our system right now, because social and behavioral determinants and access to care are so determined by zip code and by social strata. As we think about prevention, if we were in a forum like this 15 years ago, one of the questions in the Q&A session would be, will there ever be a vaccine against cancer? Well, the good news is we have one. And it protects against 6 different cancers, including head and neck cancer and cervical cancer. And the problem we have now is that we can't get it administered to American children. We don't have school-based vaccination strategies to protect American youth against cancer in a setting where we have a scientifically safe, proven vaccine that can be given in 2 doses for $150 to protect against 6 different types of cancer. As Sue was saying a moment ago, I just came from an administrative experience in Canada for 3 years, and my nieces and nephews there are in school-based vaccination programs. And the kids come home from school at ages of 11 or 12, and they've got a piece of paper that says, we're going to vaccinate all the 6th graders this year. Sign here if you want to opt out. And in that setting, the government has basically said we want to protect the whole society against the scourge, the economic effects of cancer. And we're going to use science to drive policy, and we're going to really use that as an opportunity to protect the whole generation of Canadians against the whole set of cancers that we can't possibly afford to pay for down the road. We're going to relieve those individuals of the pain and suffering associated with future cancer development. And we're going to protect the taxpayer against the future cost of caring for those patients when they develop cancer. So a lot of the work that we need to do needs to be to fund NIH research and also to put rational policy in place on the basis of strong scientific evidence that exists today and vaccine strategies that we could put across the nation to protect all American children against cancer.
Thank you. And I have to say, I think you're going to send it that way. This notion of your zip code becoming one of the most important determinants of how you're going to experience health is one that's growing in terms of the notion of social determinants of health and provider systems really having to understand that overall. You're going to hear a lot about health in all agencies. So as you think about the notion of policies being created, and you think about them in silos, such as education or environmental or any one of those, you really have to think of them in a very cross-disciplined way, because the only way we're going to really tackle some of the health challenges you've talked about, particularly with regards to the social determinants of health, is making sure there is health in all agencies, in all policies. So let me turn now, and we're going to go, just because we're pushed for time here, is now we're beyond treatment, right? And you've survived, and this is now really important to figure out how do you feel after knowing you've survived the cancer challenge, and how do you activate your support networks, and what can we be doing more of to be able to really help the cancer survivor?
I just want to say exactly what you said. I mean, I went through the same thing. Just to touch on that, the nurse was like a blessing to me, even though she came in a hazmat suit with the chemo like this. I don't want to get that on my body. I'm like, you're going to put that in my body? And then she put it in a biohazard chemical waste basket or trash can. So I was like, wow. And, you know, mind you, I had just had surgery, so I was on morphine, etoposide, and cisplats. So I'm like, and the doctor comes in, he's like, hey, Mr. Gomez, you look great. I'm like, I don't feel great. But that's, you know, that's the business of cancer, because I found out that it is a business. Because now I'm becoming well-versed, and I'm not only a survivor and a patient, but now I'm learning about vaccines and how long it takes for a vaccine to actually go through the FDA to be, you know, out in the market to the masses. 8 years, right? Then you find out about the funding, then you find out about different organizations, you find out about insurance, what type of insurance, percentages, and you start becoming well-versed in something that I mean, I went to the school of cancer to be informed, and to take that same information and that knowledge and to now be that beacon to the kids. Because you touched on something that's very important, prevention. Because we're not taught prevention in high school. We're not taught prevention in elementary, right? But now that you can speak about diet, nutrition, a lot of the inner cities, they don't have Trader Joe's or Whole Foods.
Remember, medicine was a fee-for-service, and still is for the majority, right?
Exactly.
And therefore, you are paid on you treat on what you can get paid.
Exactly.
Not because the doctors don't want to, but because that is how they're paid. So trying to work on moving that to a different place. But like you said, medicine too is a business.
It is a business, and I learned about the pharmaceutical business as well, because I would, you know, walk to do my chemo, and there would be the pharmacy there, and I would see them mixing up the chemo. So I would ask questions. They're probably like, why does this dude ask so many questions? Well, it's because I want to understand this. And that's why I chose to do what I'm doing now, life after cancer. And mind you, a lot of things that people don't talk about is the mental health issues about life after cancer. Coping and dealing with the trauma that we suffered and the trauma that the family suffered through this experience. We talk about the physical, we talk about the survivorship, but we don't talk about mental health. And that's a big important issue that we need to start addressing, because I'm still coping with it. I still have triggers. There's times when I go into these pediatric centers and the cancer centers, and I'm looking at these kids, and I start bawling uncontrollably, because I know that I suffered and I went through that same experience that these little kids that have no idea what they're embarking on, and the challenges that as an adult I had to overcome, and now they're going through that. So it's like triggers are very, You know, it's a very real conversation, and it's a narrative that needs to be talked about. And a lot of times we don't address those issues, the mental health issues, you know? And that's something very important as well.
Yeah, very much so, and thank you. So if I could turn to you, Greg, and then if you might comment too, Peter, as you know, how do we really think about better support systems once you're in survivorship? And I asked you to talk about this a little bit from the professional realm, but also your own experience as a survivor, and then I'll turn to you, and if you could just mention how you think about this as a provider system, because once they're out of your care, you don't really have to worry, do you? And I'm being purposely provocative, by the way. So I'm curious how you'd answer those.
Well, I have survivor guilt because I'm one of the few people I've met who had 0 side effects from the chemotherapy. So when I was in treatment, I didn't talk about it. And I didn't say to the nurses, boy, I'm sure glad I don't have any bad side effects, because I'm looking around the other people in the ward and they're having a hard time. So here's the problem people like me have. I'm a privileged white male with good insurance who knows a lot of cancer doctors. It's not hard for me to get care, you know, and it's not hard for me to get care from my friends. It's really hard for me to get care to reservations. It's really hard for me to get care in housing projects. So my motivation is, I tell people, 3 cancer stories. My cancer story, my friend with 2 young kids who had glioblastoma and had no hope, and my friend who had multiple myeloma, which is a disease that a lot of people live with for decades, who was given 3 years and died in 3 years. So the disparity between what we're doing well and what we're not yet doing well is what drives me. And, we're a 2-car family. I have 1 car with a foot emergency brake and 1 car with an electronic emergency brake. Now, which of those cars do you think I drive with the brake on? The one with the foot brake. I drive with the brake on all the time, and I don't notice until I'm going, why is this sluggish? And then I'll say, oh, I got the brake on. The other car, you can't drive with the brake on, because once you start driving, the brake comes off. That's what we have to do in cancer care. Most of the research we do now is with the brake on. We've got to create a system that the default is that we're going as fast as we can, not the exception. And that means people have to be purposeful to change the way they were taught to do what they do. And people are very resistant to doing that. It's scary. It's dangerous. It's not rewarded. You don't make as much money. And then yet, that's the answer. So let's quit dancing around the answer and dance with the answer.
Thank you.
As we think about the needs of survivorship, there are really 3 broad areas that we have to think through. Late effects of cancer treatment, which are extremely important for us to screen for and manage. Recurrence detection, which is extremely important, so that if recurrence develops, it can be identified early and is easily treatable. And then the development of second malignancy, because we know that many patients are at risk for developing a second malignancy. And developing a program for survivorship that uses innovation or that creates a digital survivorship passport, and then partnering with primary care physicians so that we have ways in which we can reassure the patient that we're going to be looking in those 3 areas, and that we can partner with the primary care physician, that we're digitally integrated in ways in which we will not lose data. That's very important on our side, and we will not miss out on the opportunities to focus in these 3 areas. And I think a lot of our future work in survivorship will be working to really partner with primary care doctors and health systems to ensure that that navigation piece and those 3 areas can be optimally managed through innovation.
So thank you for that, and we're out of time, unfortunately, to be able to go on further. But you heard a lot around not only the personal patient journey along the way, but some of the things to consider as it relates to what the Biden Cancer Initiative is doing, what AT&T Connected Services is doing, and MD Anderson in terms of looking at innovation, connectedness, and technologies, not to mention some of the services for the patients. So with all of that, I'm just going to say, I don't think we have time for questions, do we? No, unfortunately. I'm just going to say thank you very much for your attention. Give it up for this incredible panel. I am going to ask for Deep Six to come up on stage. This is a company from last year that was selected and that MD Anderson and AT&T have been working on together, and the Biden team have been working with. And we'd love to hear a little bit of your perspectives in terms of your progress from last year.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wout. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Deep Six AI. And first of all, it's really great to be here. I'm very happy we can be here. I mean, I feel like I'm a little fly on the wall with all of these more illustrious people in this audience. We use AI on clinical data to match patients with clinical trials. Now, of all the things we could be doing with AI, why bother about clinical trials, right? Now, as many of you here know, but most people don't, clinical trials are basically the key accelerator of innovation in healthcare. Every new drug, every new device, every new procedure in healthcare must be tested on real patients to show that it's safe and to show that it works. Without that basic feedback loop, we cannot really show what works and what doesn't work. We cannot iterate. We cannot actually make progress in innovating and finding cures for cancer. Last year, when we were here at South by Southwest, fairly well-known person, actually, Vice President Joe Biden, went on the stage in a big, big room, and he mentioned one of the key sobering statistics about innovation and research in cancer. He says that today, fewer than 5% of all the cancer patients participate in clinical trials. In order to accelerate that research and actually get more new drugs into research and eventually to the market and to patients, right, that number should be at least 25% or 50%. So why is that not the case today? And from our perspective, which is limited, I'd almost say like it's solution-based rather than problem-based, we see two major things. One, it's really hard for researchers to find patients that match these very complex eligibility criteria for trials. Two, it's really hard for patients that don't know that much about all the data, for who those eligibility criteria are even 10 times more complex and hard to understand, who don't even know all of their own data, right? It's really hard for them to find the right trial to enroll into. So what we've been doing, at first, we actually build a solution that solves the first part of it. We go to academic medical centers. We started with Cedars-Sinai. We're looking forward to working with MD Anderson as well, hopefully, with a couple of other cancer centers and general hospitals. What we do, we use AI to look at all the clinical data for a patient and to take all of that structured and unstructured data that's like in multiple different fragmented databases. Some of it is in nicely labeled diagnosis fields or problem fields, but a lot of it is just like text fields, just like notes by a physician. Traditional software has a really hard time reading that. So what we do with AI, we understand all of that. We put that into one view of a patient, which looks like a multidimensional vector, like a graph, where you have like all the clinical features like symptoms, diagnosis, outcomes, genomics, biomics, etc. That gives you like one view of a patient. We then match that against those clinical trial criteria. Doing so, we can find patients for trials in minutes, where today it takes months. So that's great, right? I mean, you can save 200 hours per trial on average. Now, the bigger problem, to be honest, and that's something that I learned here on a similar stage last year, is I was fortunate enough to be here at my company, and we actually met Vice President Joe Biden last year. We spent like an hour there, and I can say I'm from Europe, and you kind of go into this fairly cool, like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's nice. When you're actually in the room there, I was starstruck. I was completely blown away. I had to like, wow, if only he had run for president. That's another thing. But the key thing is like, this was really powerful. But then we had another meeting actually here on stage with people who are cancer patients and cancer survivors. And that's what really, really made it hit home. When I walked off the stage then, there was actually a woman who came up to me, and she was a stage 3 cancer survivor, breast cancer. And she told me firsthand how hard it was for her to find a trial. She says, I go onto these websites, I look for things, I go to clinicaltrials.gov, I go to cancer.gov, etc. I type in a couple of the things about my disease, I get a list back of 140 different trials that I may be eligible for. I look them up, right? I go to these sites, I call them, I take surveys, I take questionnaires, etc. I spend weeks and months of my time, and I don't have much time, weeks and months, and then they tell me, oh, you're not eligible, I'm sorry, and I cannot participate in this trial. That is crazy. That really does make sense. The technology today and AI and other things can solve that, right? We can actually you can look at your data, we can match against all criteria, you can know these are the trials you're eligible for, these are the ones you're probably not eligible for. These are trials that may help you, these are trials that may not help you, right? All of that can be done in minutes. And we are part of the solution, but that's not something we can do, honestly. I mean, we're a small company. What we need is reach out to the Biden Foundation, right? 2 organizations and hospitals, so patients have an easy access to that. So we can deploy an algorithm, so we can deploy methods, or other companies like us can do the same thing, but it has to go somewhere where there's reach, right? Where patients can access it. So one of the things that I hope to see this year and going forward after this South by Southwest is that we can make progress in now solving a problem for patients after what we did last year, where we started solving the problem for the researchers. Thank you.
Thanks. So you can see the connections made here last year have accelerated companies like Deep Six, and I hope the connections you make in the room with the folks on the stage will accelerate cancer across the continuum. So I want to thank the sponsors for today, MD Anderson, Merck, and AT&T, and remind you all to come back in 25 minutes for session number 2, where we're going to focus on connecting more dots and the role of data and convergence to accelerate cancer prevention, diagnostics, and therapy. So with that, thanks to the amazing panel, Tabu, Dr. Biden, the rest, and we'll see you back here in 20 minutes.